Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch, now streaming live to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch simultaneously. And I'm Bill Stone. Tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we will have, as usual, the weekly current Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics for where I live. We will talk about how the woke argue and how it makes them the worst. We will have a Superman and Lois Season 1, Episode 10 review. We will talk also about my second channel, Tales from SYL Ranch DARKROOM, which will be very interesting. We'll also talk a bit about the fact that I did have a brief vacation to out to my family's ranch land, and I have done a return from SYL Ranch, sort of. We'll have anything else that you can think of and anything else that I might want to talk about. This is, of course, a live stream, so you are free to talk with me about anything that you want in chat. You can ask me any question, whether it's political, social, the name of the virus, whose name I can't mention on the YouTube side without the video being banned, Civil War II, or even things pertaining to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I am happy to answer each and every question in as much detail, as truthfully as I can. There are some personal issues that I won't discuss, but anything else is pretty much fair game. I don't want to go much longer, however, than about 3 hours on the stream because I'm an old man and I have lower back arthritis and it hurts for sit in this chair for too much longer than 3 hours. So initially, I do have to do something real quick, reload the Facebook side so I can definitely see the, probably have to mute it. So I can definitely see, I don't see my comments on the Facebook side. I know I should be seeing it, you worthless piece of crap. Sorry about this. Facebook always gives me a bit of trouble when I'm trying to get something useful done with everybody else. Everybody else has a little pop-out window so that I can see all of my comments and stuff that are going on and the live stream. Facebook sucks at that. So I'm going to see if I can pull that up and mute myself so that you guys don't go nuts. And it looks like now I'm going to be able to see it. I have to actually have a stream sitting there in front of me so that I can see it's so ridiculous. Anyhow, to answer now the question that nobody asked, what are this week's Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics for where I live? As always, I do source these with the City of Lincoln / Lancaster County Health Department. There is a link to it in my description box in Twitter and on Twitch and YouTube, on Facebook and YouTube, Twitch when I'm done because they don't let me put in a detailed description. You'll notice, however, that some of my statistics aren't quite the same as the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department, but this is because I use a more accurate, up-to-date count of the county's population rather than what they do, which is based on census information alone. So the current Lancaster County, Nebraska population is at approximately 324,216. Total Lancaster County deaths is up to 238, which is up one. Count them, one from 2 weeks ago. That is probably one of the lowest upticks that I've seen yet since I've been tracking this on this show. For comparison, as always, the number of people who died of heart disease in Lancaster County in 2019 alone was 485, which means that over the entire course of the pandemic, the 1.5 approximately years of the pandemic, fewer people, less than half the number of people have died of this virus than the number that died of heart disease in only 1 year in 2019. Total Lancaster County confirmed cases is at 31,477, up 68 from 2 weeks ago. I didn't break down as to when those two things came up. I was on vacation for a week, so I don't know exactly when those came up, but they still are a very low number of increases, very likely still the smallest number of increases since I started tracking the virus in the show, and frankly becoming almost statistically insignificant or irrelevant. Number of positive cases classified as recovered is at, slipped off my thing there, 30,154, which is up 609 from 2 weeks ago, which is a good thing. The more people who are showing as recovered, great. I don't exactly know what this classification actually means. So given that there are only 238 deaths, I guess that leaves approximately 1,055 people in some kind of Schrodinger's cat style limbo as being both dead and alive at the same time. However, that is, 512 more people, less people than 2 weeks ago who are in this limbo. They are now 512 more counted as living. So apparently the waveform has collapsed, and we now know that they are alive. The total number of completed vaccinations in Lancaster County is at 159,478, which is up 8,446 from last week. This makes the percentage of the population that has been vaccinated at 48.189%. And given, if you've tracked me on this show since I started tracking the virus, given our stats, our rates of increase over time, the vaccine has yet to have the slightest effect. Holmes Castillo 10, sorry if I'm going on to you. I do want to talk to you. I was having an interesting conversation with him about HIPAA. I believe it was you. So yes, I do want to go into that. I will, as soon as I'm done with my stats, I'll talk to you about that. So stick a pin in it for just a second. I appreciate you coming over here. Again, given how I've been tracking these stats, they've been decreasing long before they started giving out the virus, the vaccine rather. There appears to be absolutely no impact whatsoever. Deaths as a percentage of confirmed cases is at 0.757%, which is up 0.002% from last week, and this is a number that has been statistically identical for months now. Deaths as a percentage of population is now at 0.0734%, up 0.003%, and statistically identical since the pandemic has started. One thing I want to mention, and I'll get to you right after this about the HIPAA stuff. Our massa here in Lincoln, Nebraska has decided to let all 324,000 of us set free come this Friday night, tomorrow at midnight Central Time. They are lifting all the restrictions that crushed our businesses for a grand total of 238 deaths, which is less than half the number of people that died of heart disease in 2019 alone. They have finally decided, oh, thank you, massa. My body may belong to the government, but my soul belongs to YouTube. So the medical records thing, interesting that was happening there just before the show started. Got into a conversation, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pull this down here so I make sure I get your nick right. Jonas Castillo 10, I think, or Honest Castillo. Okay, got it. Okay. Or Honest Castillo, I'm sorry, 10. Eyes. He and I were talking about it in a thread over on Twitter in terms of what HIPAA is allowed. Oh, it wasn't you? Okay, all right. Whomever it was. I appreciate your coming over to talk about it. I would love to have that conversation. Actually have some sort of definitive conversation. When people say they want to have a conversation, usually they don't. Around here, we try. The question came up. Someone posted a question on YouTube, on Twitter, which was, if your employer required you to get the vaccine or be fired, what would you do? My thinking was, and I'm prepared to admit that I may have been wrong, but my thinking was that based on the 40 or so years I've been in the workforce, that they couldn't ask me for that. I mean, whenever I go to, transfer my medical records from one doctor to another, got to sign, HIPAA paperwork and paperwork that gives authority to share that information between doctors. You have to sign paperwork to share information with your doctors and your insurance providers between various, doctors who are your GP and people who are what am I trying to say? Specialists, things like that. That always requires paperwork. And in 40 years, I have never heard of someone saying, I need to see your current medical records as a condition of employment. In fact, I have only ever seen the exact opposite of that. So my assumption was that this was due to HIPAA. Which is, I'm blanking on it, God knows. I wrote all kinds of stuff that had to do with it in my in IT for 30 some years, but I've forgotten what it is. But the HIPAA law is the one that's supposed to secure your medical records. We have to in IT go through quite a lot of hoops to make sure when we're dealing with systems that deal with medical records, to make sure that they're very heavily encrypted, that it's not something that just anyone can see. Only certain people can see certain parts of it, and they're typically medical professionals and insurance providers. And again, the paperwork has to have gone through to allow people to see it. I mean, even if you're working on a help desk, you can't just see the information. It's very limited. You have no idea the amount of hoops that we go through in IT to make sure that this data is visible to only a certain select number of people. So when you tell me that an employer has a right to ask you for those things, that runs counter to everything that I've done in my career and counter to what I've heard about. So if you want to mention something there in chat about what you believe they can or can't do, I can only take from my own experience, as an employee, and my experience as dealing with HIPAA in IT systems and building systems that make sure that data is not seen by the overwhelming majority of people in the world. Your character limited YouTube responses so in pieces. Okay, Cliff's notes. Feel free. Happy to hear it. I understand being character limited and you can't type out a whole freaking a lengthy report, and I appreciate you taking the time to type it out. You'll find that most of my viewers, very bright people, you don't usually see people posting fragments of sentences and things like that. So we're used to taking time to read this stuff out, and I'm happy to wait. That's not a problem. My general answer, and the other thing was I threw out an example of something that I wasn't sure would fly. To me, it's philosophically the same. It's probably not philosophically the same to people who are very, concerned about the virus. But I was thinking along the lines of, okay, and my viewers know I'm a freaking atheist. But if I were a devout Catholic, somebody who thought that abortion is murder, and I said, okay, I'm only going to have female employees who have never had an abortion. Would it be okay for me to look at their medical records to see if they've had an abortion and then fire them if they have had one? Because to me, that sounds like something that really won't fly. That's going to have people going completely nuts on so many levels. If an employer did that, I think you would hear about it in about 15 seconds on social media, and people would go ape crap crazy if it happened. To me, that is a parallel kind of example, because again, given the stats here, there is no reason for anyone in Lancaster County, Nebraska, to be even remotely worried about this, nor has there ever been any reason for anyone in Lancaster County to be remotely worried about this. So I am not worried. It doesn't worry me at all. Honest Castillo was saying HIPAA regulates how health entities grant access and share your medical records with their own organization and those they do businesses, think insurers, etc. It doesn't extend beyond that. Well, again, I'm trying to figure out how this jives with my experience in the workforce. Because, again, partly because I went and did, I worked on systems all the time that dealt with how we were going to secure medical information from prying eyes. And I never once dealt with one that said, okay, we're going to make an exception for the employer having full access to this medical information. That just never happened. And I don't believe that I've ever signed a document or given permission to my employer to access my medical records from my own doctor, for example. I don't believe I have ever signed a document like that, and I don't believe that my employer has ever and I've had quite a lot of them. I'm more than most people. I always like to joke. You can always tell when a business is going to go completely belly up is when they employ me. And not because of me, just for some bizarre reason in my career. It's only 2 companies I've ever worked for that are still in existence. Everyone, aside from that, have somehow gone under. But I don't believe I've ever given any of my employers permission to see any of my records. And it seems counterintuitive to me that they could just call my doctor and to get them, particularly considering all the IT systems I've worked on. Anas Castillo is saying the workforce is governed by ADA and EEOC. That would be rare. Here's an example. A hospital cares for and employs their employees. I think a hospital is a little bit different. I get where they have, as an employer, a very vested interest in making sure that their employees don't have problems. My parents both worked in healthcare. They were psychologists, and my mother only recently retired last year. They absolutely had to get flu shots every single time one was available because of their patient interactions. So, I can see that under certain circumstances. And in those cases, I'm pretty sure that my mother, as a condition of employment, agreed to all that, and up front that, anytime that they say we have to get something because of patient interaction, we get it. That's, to me, that makes perfect sense. And I can understand that. In IT, I have never had anybody. I can't imagine that they got a hold of my records without my permission to do so. Maybe it's not HIPAA. Maybe it's ADA and EEOC that covers that, and I'm simply misunderstanding which it is. That's all. Anas Castillo then is saying the example, HR cannot access your medical records, but anything you disclose to them would be stored as protected HR and regulated by the ADA. Okay. Maybe I am totally misunderstanding which law it is that would be at play here. Willing to say that's certainly true. Certainly possible. Ain't no attorney. I didn't have time to look. I would have, frankly, because the thread that I was involved in said, look at this stuff. And I was prepping for showtime. If you don't know, I spend about an hour prior to the show prepping for the show. So I didn't really have time to go through and look on that stuff as I might have liked. It's very possible that I was misunderstanding what it was that covers this type of situation. Whatever it is that covers this type of situation, my answer would be to an employer who said, you have to get vaccinated or I'm going to fire you. My answer to him would be, well, I have a sneaking suspicion that what you're asking for is actually illegal because you don't have the right to know what my medical records are unless I give you permission to find them. To me, that's kind of what I would say about that. You don't have the right to do that. You don't have the right to find out what my medical situation is unless I have given you some type of permission. Same thing, same reason as I say that, if I was a devout Christian and I wanted all of my female employees to be abortion free, I can't demand that you prove that you've never had an abortion or demand proof that you have and then fire you on that basis. So again, that in terms of answer to that hypothetical for me at this point question, would you get vaccinated if your employer required it? I would say, well, how's my employer? What if I just say to my employer, yeah, I had it? I mean, how is he going to prove it? Anas Castillo 10 says there is a special exception for vaccination in the ADA, Section K. This specifically grants the employer this right. Well, I didn't know that. That's unfortunate. As I say, my body may belong to the government, but my soul belongs to YouTube. Updated recently with C19. Yeah. Well, again, my overall feeling about this, if you're a new viewer, I'm a libertarian. I don't believe that it was a good idea to allow government to give away access to our bodies the way that we did over this. I think people got unnecessarily terrified, particularly in my neck of the woods. I will repeat back for your benefit as a new viewer and anyone who may be a new viewer, the interaction that I had with a bunch of Karens. I went to this fast food joint. It's a local chain. I've only ever seen it in Nebraska. But it's a fast burger joint, basically. I went to this fast food joint. Now, it was an open dining room. The booths, when seated, were about this high, just barely at mouth and nose level, if that. And they were practicing social distancing. They were only allowing people to sit down in certain places. But otherwise, there's a plastic shield between you and the, clerk. And, if you were going to they required you to get a new cup every time that you wanted to get more pop. But they weren't requiring, they had all the lids and stuff right out there where anybody could touch them. And you know how that is, right? You go to grab one and you grab 15 by mistake. And you drop off a couple, and the next person who comes, you've touched it. I have never seen anybody go into this particular burger joint in, the dining room area with a mask on. I've never seen that, because what's the point, right? We're all breathing the same recycled air, So I walk in there, and these 4 Karens just immediately at one booth go, "Oh, where's your mask?" I'm like, we're all breathing the same air. What's the point? "Oh, what about the guy at the counter?" You mean the one who's behind the plastic shield that doesn't actually touch my card even? It's touchless? Oh, all right, fine. If you're going to get all that freaked out about it, I'll go out and I get my mask. Well, people don't know. And I don't have a way to put it up right now. Some new viewers don't know this, but my mask is not a mask. My mask is a steampunk gas mask that I bought on Amazon for $10. It covers the whole face and head. My GP has said that it's fine to wear, but it's a steampunk gas mask. So I come back in with a steampunk gas mask. One of the things that's nice about that is it gives me an opportunity to talk to people about the real statistics here in Lancaster County, Nebraska, which are insignificant. I had a local viewer here who, until I started tracking this, actually thought that we had thousands of deaths in Lancaster County. We have had 238 as of this week, less than half the number of people who died of heart disease in 2019. We do not have a major problem. So it does give me an opportunity to do that. And then when I came back in, they're all laughing. And I said, these are our real statistics. There's not really that much of an issue. You don't have to be that terrified about it. But the press has succeeded in terrifying people when it shouldn't have. And it caused people to gleefully hand over control of their bodies. I don't think that was the right thing to do. I think that you have just handed over a degree of freedom over yourself that you really shouldn't hand over. Anascatio Sten says, "Sir, my only hope is to provide facts." I appreciate it. I hold very strong opinions. However, I don't discuss them publicly. I respect that you believe it is wrong. My hope is just to help understand the law. I appreciate that very much. I am not an attorney. I can only talk about what I've done in my own career. So what you were talking about, kind of what was going on in that thread, ran counter to what I was saying, what I had seen throughout my career. But I'm happy to be corrected when I am wrong. I am not one of those guys who's going to sit down and pretend, A, to know everything, and B, not admit when I have been wrong. So if I've been wrong about the law on that, I appreciate being told. One of the things I try not to do is give out false information on this show. It's why for these stats I am referencing, you can click on it down below. It's a great website, in point of fact, that shows all the statistics for Lancaster County and graphs and all kinds of fun stuff. It's a very good website. So I always try to do that. If I need to be corrected, I'm happy to be corrected. Doesn't mean I won't change my opinions about certain things, but I'm happy to be corrected in any case. But unlike you, this show is all about opinions. You may feel free to throw them out in chat. I may or may not agree with them. As you can probably see, I don't have a large enough audience to be able to ignore anybody. Been at this for about 4 years now, and I still haven't grown a big audience. But I'm happy to talk with you about anything at all. If you have an opinion, you want to throw it out, hey, it's cool with me. Probably ain't going to go much farther than this show. People who watch this on demand, usually I don't get more than double digits in terms of viewers, so you don't need to worry too much about throwing things out there that might come back to haunt you. I'm lucky. I'm very lucky, sort of. My health required me to retire early, and so I am no longer under any of my NDAs that I had when I was working. I no longer have to worry about prospective employers not liking what I have to say. I no longer have to worry about, look at my numbers. I don't have to worry about being canceled because nobody's watching me. So in that respect, I'm free to, at this point, say anything that I want to, whether it's a dumb opinion or not. Also saying, Honest Castillo 10 would never want me to change my opinion. Bid me adieu. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate your being. It would be great if you showed up again sometime soon, so thank you. Always civil. I am the adult in this room. I always try to say that. Oh, hey, TDG shared my link in a couple of groups. Well, awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Anytime that I can get and the way I grow, I always tell people is like, sub, hit the notification bell, and share me on social media. That's the only advertising I can afford because it's free. So, I want to go over again something because I've run some more numbers. And I have come to the tentative, more tentative than the last time I mentioned it, hypothesis that the virus is actually regional. And it's regional based on two factors, one being population density and the other being proximity to ocean, specifically salt water. Not Great Lakes and not lakes or bodies of water, rivers that do not have salt. It is saltwater oceans, Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean in the United States, Gulf of Mexico. What you kind of find, if you crunch the numbers, is that you have a much higher rate of infection and death within about 200 or so miles of a body of water like that, an ocean. But you get inland, and it drops off to statistics very similar to mine. Even large cities that have a higher population density than Lancaster County still see similar stuff like this. If you look at Omaha, city of a million, if you look at St. Louis, even Chicago, which is a much higher population density, has only figures that are only a little bit above this. The New York City, of course, off the charts. It is, by far the highest population density in the United States. And obviously immediately right there on the eastern seaboard. So they're just off the charts. But when you get inland, and also you're going to see this occur over in Europe, nobody in Britain lives more than 150 miles from a freaking ocean. And a huge percentage of Europe is going to be within 150 or 200 miles of, the Atlantic Ocean or the Mediterranean Sea or, the Black Sea or some of the other things that are over there. But you start to get inland, it isn't as big a deal. You get into island nations. It's bad. So I have this hypothesis, and I hope somebody who's looking in the medical field, who's looking to get a doctorate or something, will take this up. And make your hypothesis that the virus is regional based on population density and proximity to saltwater oceans, salt body of water. I think that you'll find if you crunch the numbers, because I can't crunch it for, there's no way for me to gather the information in one lifetime. I'd be getting a doctorate in this if I tried. But what I've done seems to consistently suggest that those are the two major infection vectors. And so therefore, when you get into places like here in Nebraska, you just don't have much to worry about. So, next thing on my list of things, I was gone last week. And last week I was at the family ranch land for several days. I think it was Monday through Friday. It's great. I love going out there. It is not, as I often tell people, it is not SYL Ranch. It never has been, never will be. I call it that. I just call my show that because SYL, this stylized SYL that you see here, was my grandparents' cattle brand, based off of my grandmother's first name, Sylvia. That cattle brand's been in use there's still cows out there with it, for more than a century. That's about to change, but for more than a century, that brand was in use. So it's my little way of keeping, my grandparents, and particularly the old lady, alive a little bit longer. But we have a bunch of, not a bunch, we have a small area of land that's still in the family out there. I went out there, was able to get a much better picture of the interior of that cabin. My green screen behind me, this is my standard green screen as of now, is in fact of that cabin. This big old stove here is a family heirloom that had originally been in a motel along, I don't remember which highway, 14, I think, before it became Interstate 90 a long, long time ago. That was heating an entire motel back before they had things like furnaces, coal burning, etc. It was this, heating an entire motel. It heats the cabin wonderfully because it's a fairly small area. But it is wood burning, and you do have to cut a fair amount of wood if you're going to be out there in the wintertime, which fewer and fewer people are doing. My parents' generation is getting older and doesn't want to do that much anymore. But you have to have a fair amount of wood, and you always put in a very large, what they call nightstick, a very large, wide, long as it fit into this thing, piece of wood. You do that right before you go to sleep, and then about 6 a.m. you're freezing because it's burned through. Because the temperature out there gets like it does everywhere around here. In the wintertime, it can be like negative 20 below zero. So I was able to spend some time out there. I got some very, very good video that I'm not going to show tonight. I got a lot of video, and I got it in much higher definition than I've ever been able to do before. I got some of it at 4K 60 frames per second with my brand new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2, which has become my absolute I'm never without the thing, of course. It's my phone. I haven't been without my phone for 20 freaking years. No, more than 20, closer to 30. I'm a Verizon customer. I have been since they first offered cell phones. So I've been with them a long time. So I haven't been without a phone because of my job. But this thing is so cool, in terms of being able to flip out into a tablet the way that it does. Let me get it unlocked, and it's just so useful in terms of being. I seriously considered attempting to stream from out there, except that I would have had to go through hoops to do it. You can't live stream, please, for God's sake. I need some more viewers. I need some more subs. You can't live stream anymore on YouTube from your phone unless you have reached, and I've forgotten what it is. I think it's 100 subs or something like that. Maybe it's higher. But the more subs I have, the more likely it is I'll be able to live stream. Can't do that anymore. There are, however, some technical ways around it. If you know some of the technology that would involve me setting up a server in Amazon Web Services to do what's called an RTMP server. But basically, I would be streaming via another application, not YouTube, from my phone to the RTMP server, which could then stream to YouTube. But I didn't want to go through that level of work while I was out there. I was too busy enjoying myself. But I do have a lot of great footage. There was, it was sunny. It was the first time since I was a child, however, that I've been out there during 2 different rainstorms. It's pretty unusual. It's been very hot and dry out there. When you do see the video, when I do show it, I've got so much to edit together. When I've got it finally edited, you'll see that I had that the grass was bad. It's not great. You want out there, if you're not grazing, and they weren't in that field, you want to have some pretty tall grass by this time of the year, and it was pretty short. And that's because it's just not enough rain this year. But there were 2 big thunderstorms that came through. I tried to get some video of one of them because I was so impressed with how, the lightning was showing off on my car. I may or may not have gotten some good video on that. I'm not sure. It looked like, through the viewfinder watching on this, that I was able to get some pretty cool lightning. But I haven't yet been able to pull it all in to edit it together, and I'm probably going to do that. And guess what? When I get it done and edited together, hang on, because I've decided I'm going to do this in a slightly different order than I did. When I do, I will be putting it on my new second channel. Last week and over social media, I'd solicited for some ideas for names for this second channel, because I have some notions about what I want to put on there, and it's very different from this show. This channel is mostly me talking. That's primarily what it is. There are occasionally, like when certain people pass away and stuff like that, that I will put up different videos. But I recently got a pair of programs that are extremely cool. One of them is, let's check this out here. One of them is the Topaz Video Enhance AI, and that is a really good program. It's not free. You have to pay for it. Unless you know ways around it. You have to pay for it, but it's worth the money, I think, because it'll allow you to upscale videos from almost any resolution into really nice-looking high resolutions. The other one that I use is called Flow Frames, and that does what's called interpolating. So if I take a video, for example, a lower resolution video, and I upscale it all the way to 4K, which I did, if you upscale it all the way to 4K, then you can use flow frames to interpolate. And what that does is it converts your video from whatever its native frame rate is into a higher frame rate. And I'm typically doing double the frame rate. So for like most movies and animated stuff, they shot at, or animated hopefully, at 24 frames per second. So I will interpolate up to 48 frames per second. 60 frames per second would be optimal, because that's what's being used on YouTube now and games and stuff like that. But what you see even with 48 frames per second is a radical difference in terms of what you can, in terms of how smooth the movements are and things like that. My first video that I have on this new channel, and I have it linked to in my description box in both Facebook and on YouTube, and it will be in Twitch after this is over, is the Max Fleischer, the first Max Fleischer Superman cartoon, generally known as the Mad Scientist. And it is up in glorious 4K and 48 frames per second. And I was very lucky, because for some reason, someone has cleaned up that thing. At some point in its history, that print was made pristine. I only got it at 720p, and I turned it into 4K, and it is beautiful. It is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It is so good. It is. The other ones that I have, the other prints that I have, are not nearly as good. So when I upscaled them to 4K, kind of didn't look that good, because the scratches and stuff that you're seeing on the front, on the print, come out big that way. But I did upscale all the rest of them to 1080p. So it is a double the upscaling, and I doubled the number of frames. And the cool thing about these Max Fleischer Superman cartoons is, unlike most animation, this was full animation. And that means that they animated every single frame at 24 frames per second, the standard that you usually use for movies. That's unusual. Most animation places, like even today, even if you're getting into something good, like I really like the DC animated universe of the 1990s and 2000s, they weren't really animating at 24 frames per second. Sometimes they were. And, for really exciting stuff, sometimes they would. But a lot of the times they were taking cutting some corners, and you have to, because you have a limited budget. But they would only animate like every other frame and then just photograph that single cell. Because what they do is, if you don't know, before CGI anyway, they would hand draw a single cell. A cell is an individual frame in a film, right? So you hand draw everyone. Well, the more you have to hand draw, the more it's going to cost, the more people you have to employ, blah, blah, blah. So they would maybe draw every other one and then photograph it twice. So when you do that and you do interpolation, it just doesn't work. It doesn't come out good. I tried it out with Star Trek, the animated series. Oh boy. All of the shortcuts that they took, it was virtually useless. There are some occasions when they're doing 24 frames per second animation, but they are very rare. So it was kind of useless for that. But these Fleischer cartoons, oh my God. Almost always consistently animated at 24 frames per second. They hand drew 24 frames per second for the entire 10-minute short. They're beautiful. And this one for the Mad Scientist, rendered up at 4K and 48 frames per second, is a thing to behold. It is beautiful just from an artistic standpoint. It's cool because of all the 24 frame per second movement they were doing, and sometimes they do a little bit of rotoscoping where they'd have an actual actor that they would film and then base the animation, almost trace over him. The movements of human characters are extremely lifelike, even in 24 frames per second. You up it to 48 and it just is so smooth. Those Fleischer cartoons have some very interesting places in Superman history, and if you know me, I'm big into Superman. I always have been. Among other things, the phrase "faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, and able to leap tall buildings at a single bound" came straight from those cartoons. The phrase "never-ending battle for truth and justice" came from those cartoons. The phrase "look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman" came from those cartoons. This one that I posted, the very first one, is the first time that Superman flew in any medium. The Fleischer brothers, the guys who were behind Fleischer Studios, went to DC and they said, look, you've got Superman leaping an eighth of a mile in the comics, because back then he wasn't overpowered particularly. He was faster than a speeding bullet. He could leap tall buildings. He could leap an eighth of a mile. And Fleischer brothers came to him and said, that doesn't look very cinematic. That kind of sucks when we get it on the movie screen. Can we just have him fly? And it was only in 1938 to 1942, right? It's only a few years since the character even debuted. And so they said to the Fleischers, yeah, sure, whatever, And then they thought about it themselves and said, if he's going to have them flying in the cartoons, why don't we make Superman fly in the comics? And so that's where that picked up. Late as hell, how am I doing, Bill? Well, I'm doing quite well, Marshall. I'm talking about the new channel that I'm taking, the Tales from SYL Ranch Darkroom, and the first video that I have put up there, which is the first Fleischer Superman cartoon, The Mad Scientist, which I have upscaled to 4K and have interpolated out to 48 frames per second, and boy, is it beautiful. It really is very, very beautiful print, and really cool when it's at 48 frames per second because the animation is just that good. So anyhow, those are some of the firsts that you see here in this, just in this first cartoon. And the animation is so good. It's one of the few times with animation where I've forgotten exactly, one kid who's in the video game industry said that it's animation where you have some level of effort. So like when Superman jumps or something, you see him leaning back, pushing off the ground, actually having some effort. If he's going to fly, he pushes off. It looks like he's doing work. If he's standing up and dealing with a big electrothanasia ray like he does in this one, it looks as if he's really doing effort. It's not like he is today where it's like you fire bullets at him and they just bounce off. He barely looks like he's doing anything, or CGI or anything like that. It looks like a real human being doing real motions. Look forward to seeing it later, Marshall says. Yes, it is linked to in my description box below. I will have other videos like that out there. Just today, let me look and see what I was interpolating for fun. Just today, and I didn't, for some of these, I didn't have to do any actual changing of resolutions. In this particular case, I went up from 720p all the way to 4K. But that was because I had such a beautiful original to start with. This one had been cleaned up by someone at some point in the last 70 years. It had been cleaned up at various times and really made into a pristine print. The other ones that I have access to are not nearly as pristine, and so for the most part I am not upscaling those to 4K but rather to 1080p, because upscaling to 4K doesn't do much except show off the problems with the imperfections in their prints. But stuff that I have interpolated this afternoon, because I finally finished all of the Superman cartoons, which, by the way, I'll be releasing one per week for the next 17 weeks, so you can look forward to one like every... I may do it Tuesdays to coincide with Superman and Lois. So some of the things that I've interpolated that will be going up there. I have Agatha All Along. That thing from that Disney show that we don't talk about very much because Disney and they suck. But that catchy Agatha All Along that I upscaled to 4K, and that's at 50 frames per second. That's pretty cool looking. I have the fifth Doctor Who titles that I was able to get in 1080p, and I've upscaled that to 260 frames per second. I have the Enterprise flyby from Star Trek, the motion picture, upscaled to 1080p at how many frames per second? I've got at 95.92 frames per second. I don't know if I'll keep that one because I'm not sure how that's going to go with YouTube. I just today did, from Forbidden Planet, the landing of the C-57D at 1080p and 50 frames per second. Also did the introduction from that show at 1080p and 50 frames per second. My intent is that I'm going to do the other things from Forbidden Planet, like the monster from the id attack, things like that. I'll be interpolating upwards. I probably won't mess with their native resolution because I've already got them on Blu-ray quality. Fourth Doctor, 1980 title sequence, also at 1080p and 50 frames per second. Things that don't work. The Babelfish. When you get that, the only resolution that I have of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy TV series is so low that upscaling it looks like hell. And they weren't animating the guide entries at 24 frames per second, so interpolating them out to higher frame rates doesn't work very much. There's a scene from the Looney Tunes cartoons, the duck season, rabbit season ones. There's one from rabbit seasoning called Pronoun Problem. It's an interchange that I really like. They weren't always animating at 24 frames per second, but I've got that sucker all the way up to 60. Got Sarah East from the Pop Crunch show, but those were so low res that it wasn't making any sense. Someone recently learned how to spell upscale. Did I misspell upscale in my descriptions? That's entirely possible. I'll have to take a look at it when I'm done and fix it if I have. Star Trek the Animated Series, again, nothing helps those. Star Trek First Contact. There are some things that I have upscaled that you will not see on that channel until you've already seen them in another context on this channel. There's a scene from First Contact that I've just upscaled that's beautiful. It's going to require me to change a video and edit it differently because I now have this thing in 50 frames per second. It's really beautiful, but you will not see it on my second channel until you see it here in another context. I have the Superman 1978 helicopter sequence at 1080p and 50 frames per second. I have a clip from a movie called Target Earth that I've upscaled to 1080p, but it's not that great because the original print was too low. That's what I've currently got upscaled. I've also got some stuff upscaled from the DC Animated Universe, but again, they weren't always animating at 24 frames per second, so the upscaling is hit or miss a little bit on that. Oh, didn't exist? Okay, I'll fix my descriptions after I'm done. Certainly possible. I have a spell checker, usually, that works pretty well, but it will tell you if you've put multiple words in there that are spelled correctly. I'm also going to get some stuff from Star Trek. Probably going to do things that come off of the like Blu-rays, if I forget if there are, but the Blu-rays with Star Trek remastered, because I don't think upscaling 1960s special effects is going to work that well. I am finding that upscaling CGI and interpolating out the frame rates with CGI does work pretty well. I've got 2 or 3 things that I've got that can't be uploaded because they belong to other people. But I've been downloading them and running them through these programs to see how it works and how it looks. CGI upscales and interpolates rather nicely. Models, I'm going to post the ones sometime soon from Forbidden Planet. I'm going to do a bunch of those, and the models tend to look like models a lot more. When you upscale those, they start to look even more like models, and when you put them into, double the frame rates, they tend to look more like models. I will read it again, Marshall, and fix it, whatever it is going on. So those are things that don't work that well necessarily, but CGI upscales pretty well. You're limited mostly by how realistic was the CGI in the first place. So I'll be doing some Star Trek. I'll be doing some more Superman from various scenes. I'll be doing more classic science fiction movies like Forbidden Planet and several others that I've got in mind. There are going to be a bunch of stuff showing up like that on that channel. I don't know that I'll ever completely run out of things to upscale and to interpolate frame rates out. The cool thing about it for me is just that I've got this laptop now, this high-end gaming laptop, that's actually capable of doing this stuff, where a year and a half, 2 years ago, I didn't have this, and it was just impossible. So now I'm able to take all of this stuff that I think is cool, upscale, interpolate the frame rate out, and boy, does it look pretty. It looks really pretty. The Superman one, the helicopter sequence where Superman saves Lois Lane for the helicopter sequence, very nice, very cool looking. Looking forward to putting that one up. Don't know if I'm going to ultimately run afoul of somebody's copyrights on this. I might. The clips are generally short enough that I hope I won't. But when I take an entire scene like that helicopter scene, which is an entire musical number, John Williams' entire musical number, I might lose the copyright on that one because I'm showing you're hearing an entire musical number. They're usually real good about catching stuff like that. And I don't mind, as long as they claim the copyright, and I can't monetize it, which please do go over to the channel, like, sub, hit the notification bell, and share me on social media there as well. It's how I grow anywhere. But if I lose, if they claim the copyright and I can't monetize it, I'm totally cool with that. But they did try to claim the copyright for this Superman, Fleischer animated Superman cartoon. Well, a careful study and research has shown that those fell into the public domain in the late 1960s when DC Comics failed to renew the copyrights on those cartoons. They are totally in the public domain. So they're going to fight me on it, but I know I'm going to win on that one. When I read the chat again, you'll eventually figure out that you misinterpreted what I initially said, then I'll laugh. Oh, sorry. Well, let me read the chat. Look forward to someone learned recently to upscale. Not sure what. Huh? Okay. Anyway, I'm having some fun with that second channel, the Tales from SYL Ranch Darkroom. Thank you to my viewer who suggested that. I think it's a perfect name. That'll be sort of more my artistic channel, where I'm just going to throw up, and not even necessarily my art. I'll put up things that interest me from time to time, but mostly, maybe you'll see some, original content there. But right at the moment, I'm just really, really interested in how things are in the upscaling, interpolating world, and how that makes what we maybe have seen before look very different, more lifelike, more realistic, which it does. I'm Also going to do some stuff with maybe Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek Enterprise, because that's when you started to shoot things in digital format. That's a problem, with with film. If you want to remaster to do, DVD, it's just a question of doing it in that resolution. The film is almost infinitely resolute. It doesn't have a fixed resolution. If you want to bring it up to Blu-ray, well, you just photograph the film again for Blu-ray. You just digitize it for Blu-ray. Problem with film that's shot on digital is that it has an upper limit in terms of its resolution. If you shoot something in 1080p, that's all it will ever be, is 1080p. It's part of the reason I'm doing this work with upscaling and interpolating, is because it has worked so well for me with digital videos that have a fixed resolution. So I'm going to do some of that fixed resolution upscaling just to see how it looks and how it works. Because so far what I've done is really astonishing. That Superman cartoon that's already up there, that's upscaled, I believe, from DVD, and it looks beautiful. You wouldn't think that it was. That program, Topaz Video Enhancer AI, does an extraordinary work. DDG, can I do upscaling with silent movies? Depends on how good the print is and what resolution I can find it in. I have experimentally upscaled a couple of episodes of Buck Rogers from the 1930s and a couple of episodes from the Adventures of Captain Marvel, and it's less than optimal. The thing is, those things, it's a different process to clean it up. Those tend to have bad prints. The Superman cartoons, they have prints where you get scratches that they got from being shown through movies projectors, but the prints are otherwise good, right? The prints look okay. The detail is still there. When you get into some of these older ones, the only copies that I have access to have so much noise and stuff on it that upscaling it doesn't do it any good. Interpolating the frames doesn't do it any good. You need a good quality one to start with, and then you can upscale with. So the process of cleaning things up is a whole other process, and I'm not aware of any program that'll do that automatically. These programs will do what they want automatically. I just set the settings, and they will clean up a little bit, but not much. I just set the settings, I let it go, and it takes 4 hours to do between the two programs, 4 to 6 hours to do a single 10-minute short, for example. But I can let those run all night if I need to. So it just depends. There are people out there, I've seen a few, who are taking old silent movies and they're doing interesting things with them. They're cleaning up the prints, and then they're upscaling, and they're interpolating, but it's in a different way. Because with those, it does help quite a lot to interpolate. The frame rate that they used was very different from today's frame rate. So a lot of times those things looked like they were jerky or walking too fast or walking unusually. When you interpolate them, they start to look normal. And when this people do, and I don't remember the channel, but there are several of them, what they do is they clean up the film, they upscale it to like 1080p or higher, I've seen higher, and they interpolate, and all of a sudden it breathes completely new life into these very old ones. And some of them have gone so far, and I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing, but it's interesting, they've gone so far as to colorize. The colorization tends to suck because it's done via an automated process with an AI behind it, and it kind of sucks. But it is very interesting to look at. You see so much more detail than you're ever used to seeing when they clean up those things and the prints, and they're upscaled and frames are interpolated. You'd be amazed at the kind of detail that you see. I just don't have the ability to clean up the prints. That's where the problem lies. Marcel said, don't do Babylon 5, especially the effects scene. Upscaling CG doesn't give good results. Oddly enough, so far it has. Upscaling with this program has done an extraordinary job. It does, like I say, with Star Trek. I've done a few test ones, and it'll upscale the CGI in those better than it will upscale. It'll upscale the original effects just as well as the CGI. The problem is the original effects were never, unless you get a just pristine print, which I don't have access to, weren't in that kind of resolution to begin with. It's why they changed it and put CGI in for Star Trek Remastered. And that CGI so far has upscaled rather nicely. There is, in fact, one entire sequence. You will see it in context on this show before I put it out over on the second channel. And trust me, you don't want to see the context in which I have to use it. But I'm re-editing something based on a CGI sequence that was given to me by someone who did the CGI in 720p. But man, that upscaled to 1080p awesomely. Really beautiful. Marshall saying it works well with CG that uses heavy anti-aliasing. This program has a whole bunch of different settings, and depending on the settings that I use for any given video, it can come out looking better or worse. It kind of depends on a video-by-video basis. I'm going to try with Babylon 5 just to see what it looks like. If it comes out like crap, I won't post it. It's like I mentioned, upscaling is fine with Star Trek the Animated Series, but interpolating, no, because they weren't animating at 24 frames per second, so it doesn't do the slightest bit of good. To interpolate, 12 frames per second stretched out to 24 frames, it still looks like crap. But anyway, we didn't have time. Marshall worked on Babylon 5, by the way. Didn't have time to properly anti-alias the effects on B5 due to the new nature of CG and the 6-day deadline. Yeah, oh, absolutely. The upscaling of the CGI, the quality of it really depends on the quality of the CGI in the first place. As I say, the one that I was given for this special circumstance by another individual, when you see it, I will dare you to know the difference between that and the original upon which the CGI is based. But you don't want to know, you will know the circumstances under which I use it. I won't want to use it, but I got it specifically so that I could use it for what I'm doing. And I'll credit the individual who did the rendering for me as well. So anyway, that's the second channel, Tales from SYL Ranch, The Darkroom. And take a look. There's a link to that first video. Go over there, like, sub, hit the notification bell, tell everybody about all this upscaling that I'm doing. That's going to be what the channel is to begin with. I'm sure it will be something else. There will be other content after I start to run out of things that interest me in terms of what I want to upscale and interpolate. Really, it's just me going, as I always say, make the art that you want. Well, my making art is impossible. I'm not good at it. But I can take these programs and upscale to my heart's content. So that's the kind of art I want to see. I want to see, what does it look like when you upscale and interpolate out? How does that look? Is it useful or not? So back to the actually been about an hour. I'll go back to one of the major things I was going to talk about, which is the woke and how they argue. Because 2 weeks ago, if you want to go and take a look at the comments, and please, unless you really feel moved to do so, you don't have to engage the person who I was having the debate back and forth with. I don't want to throw people at him. I was already had, LeVar Burton throw, a bunch of woke idiots at me. I'm not trying to do that with anybody else. I'm using this as a reference. Holy crap, Mercer says that upscaling is stunningly beautiful. Great work. I was amazed. That is such an amazing print that I had. None of the other Fleischer cartoons have a print that is that pristine. I am not upscaling the rest to 4K because It looks nice, but you can see the flaws in the film so much more. I'm only taking them up to 1080p. But that first one, that was a beautiful print that somebody had cleaned up and cleaned up and cleaned up. I wish that I had access to prints at even lower resolution that have been cleaned up that way, because that thing is beautiful. Anyway, the woke. And I got into it with a guy in the comments of my last video. And it interested me not because of the content, but because of the way the argument went, because it's become very, very familiar to me. And again, I don't suggest necessarily that you go over there and pile on him. I don't want that to happen. I think the conversation pretty much went everywhere it could, and there's nowhere else to take it. If he's watching, and if you want to take it any further, feel free. I'll keep going down that rabbit hole. But what it reminded me of is something that's maybe useful to know. And that's how the woke argue, and how that makes them really the worst to have to deal with, if you're going to deal with them at all. The woke are real simple. They're bullies, and they are verbally and emotionally abusive. And I know this because I know the pathology intimately of abuse, and their tactics are exactly the same as those of abusers. They are verbally and emotionally abusive. Bill Burr once talked about how women argue, which is if they're right, they argue the point and they stay on point until you are down on your knees begging for forgiveness. But if they're wrong, they go rogue. They try to find something that you're particularly, sensitive about. For Bill Burr, it was growing old alone, and no kids and stuff. And when she got off and knew she was losing the argument, she would say, "Yeah, well, you're just gonna grow old all alone," and he would just go nuts. They go rogue, and they try to come up with this statement, this Hail Mary attempt to get you so mad that you call him the C word. That I won't do it here. That's exactly the way the woke debate. If they're right, they will stay on point. And when I'm wrong, I will admit it. If they're right and I can see that they're right, I will admit that I am wrong. But when they're wrong, which is most of the time, they go rogue. They are trying to piss you off. That is their whole goal. Because when they piss you off, then they can say, "See, the only reason that you're mad is because I'm right." Here's how you deal with them, because they're only ever trying to piss you off. They are wrong 99.99999% of the time. And I don't even think they know it necessarily, but their whole tactic is not to argue the point. The tactic is to piss you off. To piss you off to the point where you either quit dealing with them at all, or you get so mad that you say something offensive, and then they'll say, "Aha, I know I'm right because you are pissed off." They will try to get you angry. They will try to push your buttons. And the way that you deal with them, if you're going to deal with them at all, because it's perfectly fine to say, "I am not engaging you anymore," which is what I did with this individual. They were way off to begin with. And we were talking about United States politics. And this individual was a Brit. Now, I don't have any problem if people outside the United States have opinions. And I don't even necessarily have a problem debating you. But ultimately, if you are outside the United States, you have no right to talk about my country's politics. You should not be saying what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Perfectly free to say, "God, if it was my country, I'd do this." Fine. But you don't dictate politics in my country, period. Because you don't know the circumstances. You don't know conditions. It's why I never, ever involve myself in the politics of any other nation. I may have opinions about, Brexit. I may have opinions about French politics, but I never get involved with them. I never stick my nose in there and say, you should do this. Your politicians are wrong. You should do this. They're wrong. They're wrong. You're right. I'm right, and I know I'm right, and you're wrong for thinking this about your politics. You don't know. I don't know what conditions are like in Great Britain. I may have opinions on Brexit, but I'm not about to tell some Brit how they should have voted on that, because I don't live there. I know nothing at all about what life is like for real on the ground there. I can't have an informed opinion. It's impossible for me to have an informed opinion about somewhere that's half a world or more away from me, where I have never so much as visited, where my sole understanding of their politics and their culture comes largely from Doctor Who. I have no right to tell them anything about their politics. Similarly, if you're from Great Britain and you've never so much as visited the United States, and even if you have, it's like I get ticked off about people who maybe have been in Nebraska once, for a few days, and so they assume they know what everything is like in Nebraska. You don't. You have to be here a while. You have to live here and work here for a while to really understand what it's like here, even in this state. And the same is true of any foreign nation. You can't go there for a vacation and say, oh, okay, I know everything about my kids. I didn't get to, but my kids got to go to France for school. They went there for a couple of weeks. They can't say what politics in France are like based on 2 weeks of being tourists. Even if you come to the U.S., but especially if you've never been here, and if your opinions of the United States are based on what you see on television, you're going to be wrong. You're just going to be wrong most of the time. You have no right to talk about U.S. politics any more than I have a right to talk about politics in a foreign country. Again, you can have opinions. You can voice your opinions. I could say, hey, I think Brexit was a good thing. I think it was a very good thing based on what I'm seeing in terms of how the EU operated and how it was handing down its laws and how it operated. I'd say, yeah, getting out of that is good. But I'm not going to say to some British subject, you should have voted this way and you're evil or stupid if you didn't, because I'm not there. I don't know what conditions are like. Similarly, if you're in some other country, you do not know what conditions are like here. If you're getting your information from some news outlet, the way that I got my information from Doctor Who, you're gonna be wrong. Have your opinions, but don't go telling people how they should have voted because you don't know what it's like here. Marshall says, ideological fanaticism knows no boundaries. Yes, that's certainly true, and I was seeing it in this discussion. That is eventually how I shut this down. I said jokingly, look, we fought 2 entire wars with your country to settle that you have no voice in our politics. So I've heard your opinion. Now you're jumping out at me. You're saying I'm bad because I have this opinion, or you're getting my opinions wrong and you won't listen to me talk about my opinions, which is another thing the woke do. And I said, well, ultimately I don't care. You're a British subject, not a U.S. citizen. You don't know what it's like here. You don't have a right to tell me what to do. I'm not engaging you anymore. And I said it in those words. I am no longer engaging you in politics. And he kept trying to come back to goad me because, again, these people are verbally and emotionally abusive, and they will use those tactics to try to get you so mad that you finally just call him a cunt. And then cunt trumps everything, as Bill Burr said. Then it's all about, oh, shouldn't have called me that, as opposed to what the idea was. And you wind up going, I'm right. I know I was right. How did I lose? And it's because they're trying to get you so mad that you essentially call them a cunt. And so they use those tactics, and that was what was going on consistently. And I finally just said, well, look, I'm going on vacation. I'm not going to talk about this anymore. This is going to an end because I'm going to go on vacation. The only communications device that I'm going to have with me is this, and there is absolutely no way I'm going to sit here and type to you on a keyboard that's only half of the size of this folded out screen, lengthy diatribes about this, that, or the other thing. I'm going on vacation. Here's the other tactic they do. if you exit the conversation for any reason, even if it's a perfectly valid one, like I'm going on vacation, I'm not going to deal with this at all because I'm on vacation. They go, aha, I won by default. I was like, I'm going on vacation. Get over it, you know. So that part was ridiculous too. Those are some of the things that they do. They try to make you mad. Okay, they believe, I think, in their heart of hearts, that if you do not share their belief system, you are evil. And so this individual was trying to get me to change things on my channel based on the fact that our ideology was different. Now, you may have noticed that I am no longer saying where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And that's because I got a good constructive criticism email from a viewer who wants me to do better and thought that maybe that was too much. There's several things that I've changed. I no longer have a scrolling lower third. They thought that that was too busy, that it took attention away from what I was saying and myself. And I thought that was a reasonable note. You know, I thought, okay, all right, that makes sense. And there's some other stuff that you may not have noticed, but those sorts of constructive criticism makes sense. I go, okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. This individual was screaming at me how I needed to take out, because everyone is entitled to my opinion, because I didn't share his opinion. Right? The whole reason I was saying that was half jokingly, but it's my show. I get to voice my opinions, and everybody's entitled to what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. You're entitled to watch me. You're also entitled to disagree with me if you don't like my opinions, but you're entitled to watch me and my opinions. It was a joke. Everyone's entitled to my opinion, as opposed to everyone's entitled to their opinion. Well, this is my show. You get my opinion. And he was like, no, you need to have this other opinion and tell people the other sides of it. And I'm like, no, I don't. If you want to tell your side, and I was perfectly, if you ever see this video, person who I was talking to, I am perfectly willing to help you start your own YouTube channel. I've been at this for several years. I have an idea of some of the things that'll make you look better, some of the equipment that you can buy, which is very inexpensive. The barrier to entry to look even like I am is very low in terms of finances, and I'm happy to help somebody, even someone with whom I ideologically disagree. And then you can go on your show and make videos about your opinions and do that. But I'm going to voice my opinions. I'm not going to alter my worldview, just my belief system, just because you say I should, you know. Marissa says the woke can't joke. There's a song in there somewhere. Yes, I have one of my many marketing memes. Says the woke are destroying comedy, which is absolutely true. The woke are destroying comedy. There are things, you know, classic movies like Blazing Saddles, just a hysterical film that you could not make today. Despite the fact the whole point of the film is to poke fun and to satirize racism, you can't make that film today. It would be impossible. There's so many things that they're just utterly destroying. But they want you to change your worldview, your belief system to match theirs. And if you don't, you are evil. It's not just a disagreement, which is what we used to have in this country. We used to have disagreements. We used to be able to talk to each other and, you know, face to face. And because it was face to face, you were limited in terms of how much of an a-hole you could be. If you could hurt somebody's feelings, you could, if it's female, you could make them cry. Men too sometimes, but we're socialized differently. You could make women cry. You could make men so mad that they would punch you in the face. But that's face to face. You have to limit what you're doing. When you're online, well, you don't have any of the social cues. You know, you don't have any limitations. You can piss people off as much as you want to. You can make them cry until they commit suicide, which happens. You just have no limitations on your behavior. And so when we get into how the woke are, they have no limitations on their behavior. They believe that you are evil if you don't believe what they believe. They will try to shame you for believing what you believe. If it even seems remotely like they're losing an argument, they will attempt to get you so mad that you just call them a cunt. They will do that. This is all abuser tactics. I know this. I've seen it in very close to my life, how abusers operate. This is sort of verbal, emotional abuse. Here's how you deal with it. TDG says, I've noticed that you will consider others' opinions. You didn't just generally rant per se, generally. Yeah, I don't usually go full Howard Beale. I sometimes do, but then only if I get really mad. I always like to say I'm the adult in the room. You know, I try to consider other opinions. That doesn't mean I'm going to voice them on my show, but I listen to you talk about it. You can piss me off, but if you're dealing with people who are basically trying to just get you really angry, the way that you do it is to remain calm if you're going to engage them at all. And again, it's perfectly fine to say, I'm not engaging you on this anymore. And they will goad you into trying to come back, by the way. You just say, I'm not engaging you on this anymore. And they'll goad you. And you go back with, I am not engaging you on this anymore. And they'll goad you again. And you try. I mean, they can go back and forth forever, but the phrase, I'm not engaging you anymore on this, will ultimately shut them down, because it doesn't matter what they type. They can type an entire essay about what an a-hole you are. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to engage you on this. They'll eventually get tired and go away. By the way, one other thing about this individual who's demanding all these changes, right? Well, I started making the changes in last week's episode. So the whole thing about everyone's entitled to my opinion, I had already taken that out. Clearly, this individual didn't even watch the video. You know, all this individual was doing was reacting basically to the title and the thumbnail, which happens a ton on social media. It's why I do stuff over on Facebook as well, because unless you tell Facebook not to autoplay the videos, it will autoplay the videos. Getting somebody to click the freaking link out of YouTube, or clicking the video link if it's just a video link on Facebook, freaking difficult. It's why people do clickbait. It's to get you to click on the damned video, because a lot of the time people are only ever going to react to the thumbnail and the and the title of the video. It's why people do clickbait. It's why my thumbnails and titles tend to be kind of clickbaity. I'm not incredibly clickbaity, but that's why they do it, because getting people to actually watch the video and react to the video is tough. Marcia says we need a return to Spock, if that was even possible. And TDG says basically a pigeon on a chessboard. On the Spock side of things, I will, with people who are just sitting there trying to act like I'm evil, I will usually say to them at some point in the conversation, they'll be so wrong and so off about what I believe, and they'll think that they will intimate that I'm trying to say something that I'm not. Often mention, I used to do vice moderating of the world's first international Star Trek forum. We had a guy on there who was absolutely disruptive, but very intelligent, and would write paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff. And I learned to be a better writer because of him. I learned how to be more direct in my ideas. I learned how to use language to be direct, because it was the only way you could deal with them. So never thought I would ever credit James Dixon for anything, Marshall, but he did make me a better writer by virtue of having to deal with him. And it served me better in my career. In fact, I wrote a lot of technical documentation where you had to be clear and concise and direct. So I learned to do that decades ago. So when these guys come off back saying, oh, this is blah, 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 and you said this and blah, 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 okay, no. See, I write very clearly and specifically. You need to read my words with the dictionary definitions of what they mean, and do not overlay your own belief system or subtext on it. It's appropriate to read my words in the voice of Mr. Spock, the Nimoy version. Not that I'm saying I'm overly intellectual or, always right or something like that. I'm just saying read it in that voice, because that will tell you I'm very rarely really emotional about it. You can get me that way, but it's pretty rare. So when you read my words, read them as written. Don't insert your own subtext. That's something else you oftentimes need to do. They'll be going on and ranting about what you believe, and you know that they are wrong. So you come back and you say, no, look at the words that I wrote. Do not overlay your subtext and your belief system onto my words. Read those words as they are in the dictionary definition. Don't overlay subtext, because I didn't put any there. I put down what I thought. I did not put down what I felt. Don't overlay your subtext. Marshall says, me too, yes, and better in logical argument as well. Yes. Having to deal with James Dixon really did help. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't necessarily throw him at everybody, but he made me a better writer. He made me better in terms of logical arguments, because you had to be. You had to be in order to deal with them at all. So when I get into these, I'll say I write very explicitly, and I don't put in words that don't mean what they say. I don't put the subtext on. That's your subtext, not mine. Being calm about that, because they'll do it all the time. They will say, this is what you actually meant. And you say, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I said. You, not me, you are overlaying your subtext, your belief system onto what I said. The subtext doesn't exist. I was saying exactly what I meant to say. You're overlaying a meaning on that doesn't exist. And tell them that. When they're trying to get you pissed off and trying to tell you that you believe this, you believe that, and you say, no, I don't. This is what I believe. And they'll come back and say, no, you believe this. I say, no, I said what I thought. I didn't say anything else. Don't overlay your subtext. These are all abuser tactics, by the way. Going in and telling you that you believe this, that, or the other thing, and that you had subtext that didn't exist, all abuser tactics. Always assume the woke are trying to be abusers, because when they argue, they usually are. When you debate them, usually they're using abuser tactics. The best thing you can do with them is not allow them to get under your skin. They are trying to piss you off. They want you to get so mad that they can turn the argument into, see, I'm right because you're so mad. That is the whole point. Ultimately, their arguments devolve to, you're mad, so I am right. You wouldn't be so defensive if I wasn't right. You wouldn't be so angry if I wasn't right. The best thing you can do is remain calm. Stay on point. Even when they're trying to do a Hail Mary to try to get you to call them a cunt, stay on point. Stay right there. Don't get mad. As Bill Burr said along with that piece, he said, know that in that moment, when they have tried to make this Hail Mary pass, that you've actually won the argument. They're going to keep at you. Just dodge and weave. Take a knee. You've won. Ultimately, that's what it means. They can keep after you forever, but just say it when it comes down to it. Say, no, I'm not engaging you anymore on this. And they'll say, oh, see, I won. And you say, no, I'm not engaging you anymore on this. Oh, well, yeah, that means I won, blah, 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 blah. No, doesn't mean you won. It means I've stopped engaging you. There is nothing further that I'm going to say with you about this at all, period. If you want to talk about this thing, I'll talk about that. But this thing, I'm not engaging you anymore. So that's kind of how the woke are. Their arguments are just trying to tick you off. They are abuser tactic arguments. I've seen them before. I know. I recognize these sorts of things. It's abuse tactics. Marshall says another nasty tactic you use against him is this. Fine, if you want to play subtext against subtext, I'll treat everything you say the way I want to in order to make your argument null. That's another way you can go. Yeah. Another one I often found is to, if there's an argument going on about something, is to make it personal. And I did that when I was talking on Twitter before I was corrected about which laws apply to things. I said, okay, if your employer is capable of accessing personal data, if they say you have to get this vaccine or you will be fired, I said, I turned it around. I made it something a little more personal. Excuse me. I said, okay, if an employer can do that, then what if I'm a devout Catholic and I say, okay, a new rule, no female who works here can ever have had an abortion. Prove to me that you've not had an abortion, otherwise you'll be fired. Take it something where it's extreme enough, but it, could conceivably happen, and say, okay, well, if it's like this, here's a parallel argument that I know wouldn't fly. There's no way you could get away with doing that, right? It's one thing to have a virus. But if you use a parallel argument for something like abortion, it tends to all fall apart, ideologically. So that's something you could do. You can make a parallel argument that's more personal to them. Make it personal. Say, okay, well, if you did this, you're saying to me, let me get this straight. Your argument is that if you do this thing, this will happen to you, or if you do this, if this thing happens, if it's like related to women's issues. Okay, so if your mother, sister, etc., if they did this thing, then it's okay that this other thing happens. And that's one thing that, if it gets personal, if it becomes less abstract, that's something usually that will cause them to whip around. So Marshall says HIPAA is a wild and woolly thing. There actually is a loophole for public health in there that could possibly apply. Yeah, we talked about that towards the top of the show with somebody who probably knew a little bit about the various laws that are involved in that, and the virus has an explicit, apparently has an explicit out that they can use. But for me, I was like, okay, so if it's okay for your employer to do this, what about abortion? As an employer, could I say, okay, prove that you've not had an abortion? If you can't, you're going to get canned. But that, again, is just an example. Make a parallel argument that is, something that you could almost see happening, but would not fly. If it's something that would apply to them personally, rather than the abstract. Say, okay, so you're saying if this happened to you and this was the consequence, that's okay? Or if this happened to your mom, your mother, your sister, your brother, the consequence you're talking about is okay? Make parallel arguments, or use the same argument but put it onto something that would be personal to them. Marshall says, that said, I will quit rather than comply. Yeah, you and I both work in an industry where we can quit and pretty quickly have another job. Not everybody is as lucky as we are in IT, particularly now. Good God, I the number of places that I've gone around that now have help wanted signs out. I mean, geez. If you want an entry level job or even a low management, I mean, there's a convenience store just 4 blocks from me that needs to hire a couple of managers because they lost them. And that's you're no longer in, and they were never paying minimum wage to begin with. They had to pay higher because that's what the market's demanding. But you're way off of minimum wage there. I happen to know the managers there 10 years ago used to earn about $30K, $35K. Now it's got to be even more. So all over the place there's jobs. So, and ultimately, again, if none of that's working for you and they're laying on this subtext, like Marshall says, you can throw it back at them, or as I usually do, which is say, okay, read my words in the voice of Mr. Spock from Star Trek, the Nimoy version, and you will understand that I am not putting subtext in. You're reading the subtext that's not there. And at the end, if nothing else works, The simple phrase, I am no longer going to engage you on this subject. Make it specific subject, because that way if they bring up something else and you feel like engaging them, you can, but you say, I'm not engaging you anymore on this subject. And that's what I did last week with this individual I was thinking to go around with. They were somebody who clearly hadn't watched the video, and was a British subject telling me, an American, how I should think and behave and what our institutions should be, without ever having so much as visited the United States, and so therefore has no conception of what conditions are actually like here. And ultimately, I just said, okay, I am no longer engaging you on the subject of politics. And they went on, and I said, I'm no longer engaging you on the subject of politics. And they went on, no longer engaging you on the subject of politics. And eventually it just went on, as I say, so damn long that I was going on vacation. I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going on vacation. I'm not going to engage you on anything at all because I'm going on vacation. And it was that prompted the, aha, I won, because I disengaged totally, and that's what happens all the time. Aha, I won because you're not doing anything. No, I'm going on vacation. I'm not going to deal with this crap while I'm on vacation. I'm going out to this building to have fun and to relax. I am not going to deal with this stuff on vacation, and I wouldn't expect you to either, you know. So that's how they argued. That's how they're the worst. They suck. Ultimately, there is absolutely nothing wrong with just saying, I'm no longer going to engage you. And let them rant all they want. Just, let it slide, bob and weave, take a knee. I'm no longer engaging you on this subject. So, all of that other stuff said, I do have a bit to talk about Superman and Lois. Season 1, Episode 10. I saw last week, so I'm not going to talk specifically about it. I will say, as always, unlike most reviewers, I do not sit down and hash through the plot, pausing to say what I like or didn't like. Typically, not with this, sort of mini reviews, but I often, if you watch some of my long-form reviews, I go into a lot of detail and I talk about everything that goes into it. This, I'm limiting myself a lot of the time to how accurate are they getting the Kansas area, because I'm close to it. But we'll take it as read that if you come to the video and you're watching right now and then you have Superman and Lois, you don't care if Season 1, Episode 10 is spoiled for you. But nevertheless, we should probably issue a...
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is because I am a secret master of fandom, and that means that the fandom is strong with me. This is not a boast or a brag. This is just where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. The problem with us secret masters of fandom is that we're cursed. We just can't see the new stuff without seeing the whole century that came before. We discover that there isn't very much that's original, and it often interferes with our ability to enjoy things. But what I don't do are outrage reviews. It's kind of like when I talk with my viewers about other things. There are a lot of people on YouTube who are actors portraying outrage because outrage tends to sell. Oh my God, look at the reviews on the new Loki TV show. I ain't going to review that because I don't talk about Disney products on this show because they support genocide directly. But all of the reviews that I'm seeing are about how terrible that show is. I don't think it's that terrible. I think we have a lot of actors because they're portraying outrage because outrage tends to sell. They will knee-jerk, as with Loki, hate everything because their viewers want to see them hate things. But I think this sets up, and in the case of Loki, I think this is true. It has set up a weird feedback loop between reviewers and fans where ultimately nobody likes it for the reason that the reviewer didn't like it. But I do not do that. If I like something, I'll say why in detail. If I don't like it, I'll say why in detail. And like other reviewers, unlike other reviewers, I am the adult, or at least I try to be, in this room. So, first thing I can say about it is, yay, IMDb is now listing a season 2. I hope that that's actually true. IMDb listing it doesn't necessarily make it true. I haven't heard that we're getting a season 2 of Superman and Lois, but IMDb is listing it, and that is always a good sign. Yay! Getting a 3rd season of Batwoman for no reason. Oh, God, I'm not going to talk about Batwoman very much. Go watch Az versus on Heel versus Babyface if you want to see my opinions of Batwoman. It's terrible. It's even more terrible now than it was the last episode, which is amazing because the episode before that, it was more terrible than the episode before that. It's awful, it's racist, and it's stupid. And as always, that production company is so inept that they managed to paralyze production assistant Amanda Smith. And she has a GoFundMe. It's always listed in all of my videos, in all of my descriptions. The Amanda Smith Rehabilitation Fund. It's at gofundme.com/Amanda-Smith-Rehabilitation-Fund. Go there. Support her because she is paralyzed because the Batwoman staff is so incompetent. Anyway, terrible show. And it's getting a season 3, and I'm just like, why? You know, their ratings keep going down into the toilet. You know, the ratings are well under 400,000 people now. 400,000. There's 324,000 people in my city alone. You can't pull in that much nationally? It's terrible. The ratings for Superman and Lois have been generally high, and the million or so mark, it dropped down, unfortunately, when they had their hiatus. The idiots had a hiatus. But it's been steadily going back up. Good show, well put together. We're getting a 2nd season. Apparently, the demons at CW are so still realizing that there is more to life than woke, racist garbage like Batwoman, like making money with advertising. So, yay, I think we're getting a 2nd season. I do continue, as I mentioned last week, to be worried for Elizabeth Tulloch's health. Every time I see her, I just go, oh man, that poor girl. She's skinny as a rail. You can see the veins in her forehead. She has sunken eyes, sunken cheekbones. She bears all of the symptoms of anorexia. And I know that that's not terrifyingly uncommon in Hollywood, but on a show that I like, I hate to see it. Eat a sandwich or 10. You know, you could put on at least 10 pounds and not have it look bad on the camera. You're skinny, and it looks skinny on camera, which means in real life, you're horrible. You're very anorexic. Eat something. Eat some food. They have not yet, in these last 2 episodes, done anything to disavow me of the idea of where Smallville is located, there's a link to it in Google Maps. Smallville, as I've figured out previously, is located at 37 degrees, 18 minutes, 35.0 seconds north, and 94 degrees, 42 minutes, 19.3 seconds west. They have done nothing to disabuse me of that. They have yet to do anything that has said to me that Metropolis cannot be in Kansas. One thing they have done is they had Superman and Morgan Edge, I've forgotten his Kryptonian name, fly out to an area that looks like the desert Southwest. I have no problem with that. They have super speed. They can fly out to the desert Southwest. That's cool. But it's not Kansas. It looks nothing like Kansas. Please don't try to say that it's in Kansas. Say that they flew to the desert Southwest in the blink of an eye. Cool with that. And they didn't say it was in Kansas, so we're good. Just writers, keep aware. There is nowhere in Kansas that looks like the desert Southwest. There's a problem you run into on this show where you have Superman seen by people like Lois Lane. She has known Clark all of her life. The glasses, or lack thereof, are not going to do it. This is not a show where the actor, like Christopher Reeve, he said to himself, okay, if these glasses are going to work, then Superman has to be a really good actor. And so when he did Clark, he did different body things. He did everything differently. It wasn't just the glasses. He did everything differently. Clark Kent had a different smile than Superman, for God's sake. This is not happening in this show. Clark and Superman are not separate enough that the glasses are going to do the job. Somebody like Lois Lane, Lana Lang, or whatever her last name is now, has known Clark all of his life. Growing up until he left for Metropolis and coming back from time to time and seeing her and, now living there. The glasses are not going to cut it. He really should shy away from anyone in Smallville ever getting a close-up view of him. It's one of the things that you'll see throughout those Fleischer Superman cartoons, as I continue to post them on my second channel, Tales from SYL Ranch Darkroom. Link below to that first video. Please go there, like, sub, hit the notification bell, and share me on social media. But anyway, and leave lots of comments. The way that he worked at that time was, Superman would just show up, do his thing, and leave. The headline in the paper was often Superman mysteriously vanishes, things like that. Just come in, do his thing, and leave. He shouldn't be hanging around for interviews or pictures or videos, because it increases the likelihood that somebody's going to figure out who he is. Just get in, do your thing, leave. That's really what Superman should do. And in this case, spending a whole bunch of time in Smallville, where lots of Smallvilleites are seeing him, and Lana Lang in particular is seeing him, the glasses ain't going to cut it. And it strains the audience's suspension of disbelief. They know, just looking at it, that's the same guy. There is no attempt by the actor to make Clark radically different from Superman, so that you could say, well, maybe, I kind of buy it. Here, you just can't. It strains suspension of disbelief to breaking point. You can't have Superman interacting with people who have known him for his whole life and see Clark all the time. You just can't. The other criticism I have about this is the evil Kryptonian thing. It's becoming too much of a trope. It's becoming too much of a trope, particularly after Man of Steel. That giant battle with Zod that created, 9/11 times 1,000. It's, evil Kryptonians with powers has now become a trope. And now we have a whole group of them, for half of this episode. It's just too much of a trope. I was kind of afraid this was going to happen, that we were headed for some kind of Kryptonian showdown. I wasn't sure how they were going to do it, but, basically we've got General Zod with a different name. It's General Zod with a different name. And he's putting together an army of Kryptonians, which is interesting. I thought the way they did it, with the execution of it, getting to the point where they had an army of Kryptonians, and then I'll get to the other part, but getting to that point I thought was okay. But the whole idea is just becoming too overused, I think. And the other thing is, if you're not prepared to show the kinds of battles that you would have between super beings that you can't do on a TV show budget, then don't do it. Yes, Marshall says Yasla. That is a good thing to come up with. In Star Trek, at the time that we were moderating the International Star Trek Forum, we came up with an acronym, YAGLA, Yet Another Godlike Alien. Because at that point, we actually went out and calculated at least 25%. I haven't calculated it since, but I think it's probably true because Gene Roddenberry liked this whole idea. But at least 25% of Star Trek at that time dealt with godlike aliens. Aliens that were so advanced that you could not tell the difference between them and a god. Q is the perfect example. Omnipotent, omnipresent, can't do anything, about to have his character assassinated next season in Picard. And we said, okay, this is yet another godlike alien, a Yagla. Well, now we're seeing so many superpowered Kryptonians, like Marshall says, Yasla, yet another Zod-like alien. Yeah, that is a good point at this point. Yaslas are overdone. Stop. Just stop. Superman has, what, 1938 to now, damn close to 90 years, 85 years worth of history to draw from. I mean, I have one viewer who really likes Brainiac. Yeah, you could do Brainiac. Why not do Brainiac? He's not, he doesn't have superpowers, but he is super powerful yet. You don't have to twist yourself into contortions to do something Zod-like with him. He's a good foe for Superman. You can have Superman fighting giant robots. There is a very large, decades worth of things that you can, emulate if you want to. Or you could do this, come up with an original idea. Do something that's original. Don't rely on this entire history. Don't do Brainiac. Don't do a Yasla. Do something totally original. Surprise me. Do something that will surprise me. They did it before. The DC animated universe, they created Harley Quinn. That was their creation that bled over into comics and all this other media. They came up with a new idea. They did, their execution of Brainiac was brilliant. In the comics, Brainiac has typically been this alien that had different, looked different ways the different times you saw him, depending on who was drawing or writing him. But an alien who came down, shrunk cities, put them in bottles, and then flew off. And he shrunk the city of Kandor on Krypton and had it, which is how Superman got a bottled city of Kandor in the Silver Age in his Fortress of Solitude that he hoped someday to be able to, enlarge so that he would, the Kryptonian citizens down there that were alive would, be back. You don't have to do that. But the way they did it in Superman the Animated Series, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, was Brainiac was an integral AI on Krypton, and he was fighting Jor-El. In fact, he was more of an impediment to Jor-El getting getting people off of Krypton, which, by the way, made perfect sense. Let's use the Phantom Zone. Let's transport everybody in the Phantom Zone. I'll fly to Earth, and then we will transport everybody out of the Phantom Zone. Good idea. But Brainiac was an AI who had said, no, Jor-El is wrong. And everybody believed Brainiac. But then Brainiac, at the tail end of it, just before Krypton was about to explode, uploaded himself to spacecraft and took off. That is a good execution, because then he comes back later when Superman is an adult. A good execution for that. So, you can do something like that where it's still an older villain, but with the same motivations and stuff, but a different execution. I'm generally in favor, however, of brand new ideas like Harley Quinn was. Yes, Starsheets player. Hey, Drop Truth, how you doing? Yes, TDG, you miss Mixius Pitlick. I'm one of the few people who knows how to pronounce that name. It's Mixius Pitlick. Yes, an imp from the fifth dimension. That's something else you could do. Another thing that they did in Superman the Animated Series that I liked very much, the execution of Mr. Mixius Pitlick, but you could do it here. There'd be no problem with that. And Brainiac betraying Jor-El. Yeah, like I said. Drop 2 says, hey, Marshal President, are you going to sell all of your crypto before the Cyber Polygon exercise on the 9th? Nope, that would be dumb, Marshall says. Yeah, there are now 2 nations that have made crypto a valid legal tender. And Marshall's general prediction is we're going to see some lowering of prices, at which point it's time to buy. I spent what little I could, a couple of $100. The last time the prices were low. I'm going to hang on to it for a while. But I don't think that it's going to go away. Marshall has done a good job of convincing me that there are cycles with this, and you just have to wait. It's a question of waiting some months or a year or so. Anyway, I would like to see these guys. Panama hasn't pressed into law yet. Bill. Oh, it's a bill. Okay, sorry. There's one nation that did and another one that's working on it. So, anyhow, there are so many things you could do. I know Drop It Truth likes Brainiac. You could do Brainiac. You don't have to do Yaslas, yet another Zod-like alien. There is a whole bunch of things to, you can get you can get some really out there ones. There was a guy, Terraman. There's something that could use an updating. He repeatedly fought Superman. He was kind of goofy. He repeatedly fought Superman in the tail end of the Silver Age. You could take him and update him. All kinds of stuff. I don't think you should touch any Zod-like aliens. I don't think you need to have superpowered Kryptonians. I definitely don't think you should touch Darkseid. Your budget kind of limits that. I mean, you can try, but you need to handle it very carefully. And I was a little bit disappointed by the fact that in this incarnation of Morgan Edge, he was not a minion of Darkseid. I would be okay with that. In his original incarnation, Morgan Edge was originally a minion of Darkseid on Earth. I was kind of hoping it would go that way, but it didn't. It turned out he was superpowered and landed, I've forgotten where, but someplace that was bad, that turned him into an evil guy. We don't need to do these superpowered Kryptonians anymore. Too many of them. Yet another Zod-like alien, Yazla, as Marshall says. We don't need that. Marshall says on crypto, El Salvador is getting a ton of negative pressure to back off from various entities. Well, we don't know what happens, but I think you're right that it's only going up ultimately. And Marshall says, yep, secure your off-ramps. Might talk about that the next week. Sure, I'll be happy to have you on, Marshall, anytime. Drop it to you like Brainiac, very well executed in the animated series, as I do. I mentioned that a little bit before you got on, or as you were getting on. You don't have to do these Zod-like aliens. There is all kinds of other things, and Brainiac is very underused. I don't think we've seen Brainiac in any incarnation of Superman after the animated series and a bit into Justice League. I don't think we've seen him at all. He's really an interesting one to do, and the way he was executed ultimately in the Justice League series was, in comics, in the Silver Age, there was this consistent trope about the Brainiac Luthor team. They teamed up several times. It all went south for them, but they teamed up several times, and they would call it the Luthor Brainiac team. So you can't really do that very believably anymore. The audience is a little more sophisticated. So what they did was they merged Brainiac with Luthor and turned him into basically a merged immortal being. It was great execution. And then an entire season after he was stripped of Brainiac that Luthor was single-mindedly trying to find a way to bring Brainiac back because it would make him all-powerful and immortal and stuff. Really good execution, in my opinion. And Starseeds Player says the Brainiac Luthor was a real threat in the animated series. Absolutely. It was very good, very well executed. The whole Brainiac Luthor thing led to one of the moments that I'm likely to upscale on my second channel, Tales from SYL Ranch, Darkroom. You can find a link to the first video on that and below. Please go and take a look at that. It's a moment that I will probably upscale because they probably did that in 24 frames per second, the same way they did the moment with Superman's true power on Darkseid a year later. But there's a great moment with the Flash that was the whole Superman Brainiac Luthor thing really built up to this incredible moment with the Flash that was just really well executed. DC Animated Universe was so good. Gotta wonder why the hell can't they do that on big screen. It was executed so good. And yes, Starseeds Player, the Flash's finest hour defeating Brainiac Luthor. Yeah. You can't even describe it. It was so well executed. The way he was keep adding his speed by going around the Earth faster and faster. And occasionally you would see it from his perspective, which was awesome. It was just like, oh my God, all this stuff's going by so fast. It was really well executed. So again, in Superman and Lois, you don't have to constantly stick to this trope of, okay, Superman's so powerful, the only way we can deal with him is by having other superpowered Kryptonians. There's a whole bunch of other stuff you can choose from. Brainiac's not been done since the DC animated universe. You could use him. There's decades and decades and decades of stuff that you can use. You could have time travel where Superman goes back to World War II. That's always a fascinating question. By the way, one of the videos that I'm going to upload. What if Superman actually interfered in World War II? Because the way his power level is today, he could end World War II. He could win it for the Allies in one day. You can do stuff like that. Come up with new ideas. I'd really love to see new ideas. Golden Age DC would be a great as an HBO Max series. Yeah, HBO, I think, has, or somebody's just recently released the Justice Society World War II, which is a decent enough movie. It'd be great to see that as a series. The interesting thing to always ask, because all of these characters really originated in World War II or around it, and they always came up with lame excuses. The reason Superman didn't get involved in World War II was because Clark Kent, when he went for his physical, to enlist, he accidentally, they told him to look at to read the eye chart. He accidentally used his X-ray vision to read the eye chart in the other room, and so he failed the eye exam. So he got a 4F. Well, that's just kind of a cop out. Why doesn't Superman just fly over to Japan and destroy their infrastructure? And so in one of those Fleischer cartoons that's going up on my new channel, you will see the answer to that question, because they didn't shy away from it. So you could do all kinds of stuff like that. What's the type of pistol on the wall? Extra large cartridge tube. That is, in fact, my Model 1911 pistol, chambered in 45 ACP, and yes, it has a 10-round magazine. It's there because this whole room, I mentioned towards the top of the show, when I went on vacation, I was able to get some very high-resolution pictures of the interior of the cabin there. This is the interior of the cabin. I put that up to tick off the liberals. I just put a couple of nails in there and took the picture with it. And as it happens, it turns out really well. It's right over my shoulder. It's also pointed at my head, but I didn't know that at the time I took it. Superman wasn't a super genius. An intellectual villain is always good. Yes, Lex Luthor, no matter what you do with him, he starts out like he started out in comics as a businessman. He ended up an evil mad scientist. He started out in the DC animated universe as a businessman, ended up an evil mad scientist. I don't think you should do anything other than just make him an evil mad scientist. And you're right, Superman is not a super genius. He should be able to be out-thought. That's another thing you can do. I mean, when he's gotten together, like in DC animated universe, when he gets together with Batman, the reason it works is because Batman is always like, I'm dealing with this guy who can smash through walls, but he never uses his brain. And he's not stupid, but he's also not a genius. It's like when you get with Batman, Batman looks at the clues. Superman smashes through the walls. It's a totally different style, and it works. Because Superman's not a super genius. Smart, nice guy, not a super genius. An intellectual villain should be able to defeat him. Drop 2 says, when superheroes get beyond Omega level, they also get boring and near impossible to write well. Yeah. It's the problem Superman has, is that he is now so powerful. They kept adding so many powers to him over the years. I mean, originally, he was super fast, he was super strong, but his description was nothing less than a bursting shell could pierce his skin, which meant that, if you fired a laser at him today, it would probably kill him. Or if you couldn't survive a nuke or anything like that, you get heavy artillery, you probably couldn't survive that. And he could originally leap 1/8 of a mile. And so it limited his powers. And so over the years, they have added and added and added and added to the point where multiple times the guy has been pushing around planets. That's crazy. I think you need to keep his power levels down. He's got to be somewhere above, like Captain America, or probably a match for Thor, but not so powerful that if you threw the wrong thing at him, he couldn't kill him. You don't have to do like they have in this series, necessarily resort to kryptonite weapons. The really bad ones can kill him. It's just that for some reason the audience has come to expect him to be this incredible Omega level, super powerful being, and I think it's better for the character if you don't write him that way. Drop 2 says, Drop 2 saying Colt 45. No, it's not Colt 45. Colt 45 is usually refers to a revolver. This is a Colt. Well, it's actually my Kimber Custom Classic, which is essentially an accurized Colt Model 1911 pistol with a large capacity mag. Theme Fistful of Dollars springs to mind. You watched it recently. The plot's been copied so many times. Oh, yeah, it's a good movie. Drop True says Superman is naive, not a simpleton. Yes, he's not a simpleton. He's not stupid. But he's also not Batman. He's not Lex Luthor. Those are people who intellectually could run rings around him, Starseeds Player says Byrne ranged back his power after the 52. He liked that version. Yes, he's had it done 3 times that I'm aware of. Early 1970s, he was depowered temporarily. I don't know why it wasn't permanent, but they depowered him for a while. That was a good idea. And then also when they rebooted the character after Crisis on Infinite Earths, he was also not that incredibly powerful. But as time goes on, they kept adding more powers. Keeping him to a certain limit. Like I say, let's say a match for Thor, but crazy, insane powerful, no. Maybe the match for the Hulk, that strong, that big, that, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, probably fly, super strong, very fast, fly, but not crazy powerful, Marshall says, that's the one thing I really liked about the DCEU. Superman weapons did have an effect on him. Not too much, but some made the stakes a bit higher. Yes, there were weapons that would, cause him to become unconscious, or, you shot him with a big, nasty thing. He would at least fall down and grunt and, stuff like that. It was why when the big finale for that entire universe occurred with the last episode of, and I've shown it on the show, I probably have it still, but the last episode of that, the reason that it worked, the Superman's true power, I'll show you how powerful I really am, worked, is because we'd built up to that over time. And the DC Animated Universe also showed that he started out pretty much as a normal person, but over time gained more and more power. By the time he was in high school, he was in the football team, but, just killing it. And kept getting, and then he realized, oh my God, I can fly. So it built up. And so even over time, it gave him the opportunity to get to that point where it worked, it paid off to do the, I'll show you just how powerful I really am, because by then he really was incredibly powerful. Let me see if I have that, because I love showing that. I thought maybe I had it. No, I don't have it. It's a pre-prepared card. But I will from now on, because I like that thing a lot. It's one of the things that's going to show up on my second channel, because I have interpolated it up to a higher resolution, and I've upscaled it and interpolated that out to 48 frames per second. So let's see. Starseeds Player, got to go to sleep. Good night, all. Good night, Starseeds Player. Glad to have you here. Feel free to come in any old time. Drop 2 says Marvel goes to the ultra-powerful route with Hyperion, Blue Marvel, and the Ridiculous Sentry. Yeah, and I at least one of those, I think Hyperion is intentional. It's a riff on Superman, Okay, we'll go insane crazy just to show what that happens, when you do that. It's not a main character. It hasn't been part of the big 3 since World War II. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Drop 2 says Hulk power now is just ludicrous. Yeah, I mean, his power has always been, on a level where in the comics, and I don't follow him in the comics very much, but I mean, the deal has always been that, the angrier he gets, the stronger he gets. And even in the first crappy Hulk movie. You do actually see that happening. In the MCU, well, Thanos could kick the crap out of him. That's okay. That level of power is fine, where you at least do have some things that can hurt you. Or Tony Stark with, the Hulkbuster armor could beat the snot out of him, knock him out if you tried really hard, ran him through a building and then hit him real hard. So anyway, back to Superman and Lois. Do something other than these evil Kryptonians. And the way that they got rid of it, cop out. If you're going to make an army of super powerful Kryptonians, you're going to have to go the distance. You're going to have to show that battle. And you can't on a TV budget, which is why they just sort of got rid of them. It was a cool moment, effects-wise, visually. It was. I got to hand it to them. Anytime they do Superman doing super things, it's pretty cool. Please, guys, more in the, daylight like he was this time. But those are very well handled. It's just that we're talking about, okay, we built up to having an army of, super-powered Kryptonians. And then we're going to depower them all at once before we had that battle. Guys, if you're going to do that, you have to follow through. Otherwise, the audience feels cheated. And that's kind of what happened here. So that's really all I have to say about it. They didn't do anything that, moved around where Smallville ought to be. So I'm happy as being one of the few people who can say, okay, well, this was good or this was bad in terms of locationing. Yeah, well, that was good. Haven't done anything bad yet so far. You just can't let many Smallvilleites go around seeing Superman. They're going to know instantly. If you're going to do superpowered aliens, you have to follow through. You can't just go, okay, we're going to get rid of all of them in one fell swoop. You're going to have to do it. And if you can't do it, don't do it. Come up with some new ideas, or do something that hasn't been done much, like Brainiac hasn't been touched in quite a long time. There's interesting things you can do with that. Mr. Mixus-Pitalik. I wouldn't necessarily base an entire season arc around him, but it would be interesting to have him on from time to time. Yes, Marshall says we need a wow, an original baddie. Yes, yeah. Superman has a lot of things that you can draw from that would work for a TV series. It would be even better if you just came up with a new idea. Drop2 says, I watched Loki. It's surprisingly well written, but is quite predictable. Lady Loki as the villain. Yes, don't really, as I mentioned, or I did mention it a bit earlier, we don't really talk about the Disney properties after they decided they were going to credit a part of China that is actively involved in genocide, as well as cancel Gina Carano for no good reason. Between those two things, mostly the genocide, honestly, but them canceling Gina Carano put me on to the whole genocide deal. I've decided I'm not going to deal with them anymore, not on this channel, because it pushes them. What I did mention, and what I find interesting, is I do think it's well written. The Lady Loki was predictable because they've gone all SJW and woke. Unfortunately, that's what's going to be happening. I did catch, by the way, today or yesterday or something like that, Scarlett Johansson did an interview where she said that Black Widow had been sexualized in Iron Man 2. Have you ever seen what this woman wears on the red carpet? There's a pot and a kettle around somewhere calling each other black, because Scarlett, you yourself have been sexualizing yourself ever since you've been an adult. I dare say that there is probably at this point very few, if any, roles that you have gotten solely on your acting ability. You are a hot woman, and you have been trading on that. Let us be real. Coming down on Marvel because they took advantage of exactly what you've been taking advantage of for the last 20 or so years, and you've had a long period. You're about to age out because Hollywood just chews up women like that. But come on. You yourself have been sexualizing yourself in real life. Get a grip. But anyhow, Loki, I think, is pretty well written. The being all woke doesn't shock me because they decided to go that way. Just look at how racist Falcon and Winter Soldier was. Utterly racist and stupid. That doesn't surprise me very much. What I find interesting is what I said in the introduction and what I say in every introduction to my reviews, is that we've got a lot of people on YouTube who will not acknowledge anything good about that show. They are all saying it's terrible. It is them, I think, for the most part, being what I say in my intro. They're being actors. They're automatically knee-jerk hating everything because their audience likes to be enraged. They like to be enraged. So they're enraged, audience is enraged. Ultimately, you can't enjoy anything, even if it's well done. Loki certainly has its flaws, but it is not horrible the way that everybody's talking about. Drop 2 says, I think timekeepers are a myth, and hopefully we'll find that the big bad is Mephisto. The TVA is an Orwellian hellscape. That comes from their source material for that. But the thing is, I wouldn't have done it. Because I didn't know the source material till I looked it up. But the source material is kind of a joke. In the source material, all of the agents of the TVA are basically exact duplicates of a Marvel employee whose job it was. He was an archivist, researcher, one of the writers as well. I've forgotten the name, but all of the agents look like him. They're based off him. It was sort of a joke. It was an in-joke. I don't think I would have done that at all, because you're taking source material that's kind of a joke and trying to make it into something that's sort of real. Drop 2 says the ghost in the machine isn't sexualized. Oh yeah, everything she's done since the woman grew breasts has been trading on her beauty. She is a beautiful woman. But complaining about sexualization when most of your career has exploited the fact that you're attractive. Gain 40 pounds and see what happens. You're about to age out. You're in your early 40s. You don't have long for Hollywood, because it will spit you out the moment that you are no longer young and attractive. You have, to some extent, Scarlett, always been trading on your looks. You have been incredibly lucky, Scarlett. You were a child actor who was lucky enough to be talented enough and gorgeous enough to move into adult roles. If you're lucky, you'll be able to get into directing before you completely age out, because you will. You are trading on your looks. You always have. All you have to do is take one look at your photos on the red carpet. Come on. It's stupid. Marcia says, okay, I'm going to say I don't really mind this. I'm not sure what you're talking about minding. Scarlett is complaining because she's getting old. Good point. I don't know that I think she's still very attractive. I think the thing with the Black Widow movie, I'll be interested. I mean, I won't pay for it, but I'll be interested to watch it, because I don't pay for Marvel products anymore, Disney products. I'll be interested to see it, because I think it's going to wind up being too late, too little too late. And the way they kept pushing back, I mean, that's something that should have been slotted in after Civil War. It's been too long now. I don't think it's going to work. Drop 2 says, Emma Peel, Diana Rigg of the British TV series The Avengers, was sexualized. Burton's Catwoman was sexualized. There's a trend here. It's common. It's particularly common in comic books. I mean, the natural audience for comic books is 12-year-old boys. And what's happened is, as a generation or so of those boys aged, my generation, we demanded more adult material in comic books. But female comic book heroes have always been very sexualized. There was a lot of yelling and screaming about Wonder Woman. Because Wonder Woman is dressed really skimpy, especially for the 1940s. That's really skimpy. There's a book about her creation that I don't recall very much. It talks about William Moulton's open marriage and stuff and how all of that worked. But he was criticized for basically creating a strip model for young boys. That's where it starts, And if you look at female superheroes around that time, they went, oh, okay, getting away with this in Wonder Woman. Let's have Miss America be this way. Oh my God, it's the one from the 1940s that should take the cake as Phantom Lady. She barely wore anything. This has been going on since forever. And as long as males, and they are, sorry guys, males are the primary audience for comic books, then you're going to see, shapely figures and big hooters. Large breasts, very little clothing, and that's the way it's going to be. That's the way it's always been with comics, and you can't change it. Going woke is going to mean that you are not going to sell a damn thing. Having obese female superheroes will not fly with the primary audience of comic books. And you're not going to bring in female readers because they're just not interested in that stuff. The only time comics have really appealed to women was in the 1950s after the baby boom generation grew out of comics. And then they started doing a lot of romance stuff. And I'm not trying to be particularly, saying that women only like one thing but let's look at the demo. The real demo for comics is 12-year-old boys. It's just that my generation and older demanded more of them. And because it's males, you're going to get whacking material. There, I said it. That's why comic book females are always like that. Bleeds over into the films. That's just the way it is. Marston, that's what you're saying. Yeah, okay. William Marston, that was the creator of Wonder Woman, along with his wife and other woman who was in his relationship as well. They had a lot to do with it. You want to really look at Wonder Woman. She reflects a lot of Marston and his partner's ideas on bondage. That Wonder Woman originally, she would talk about how it was a positive thing to be basically have a master or a mistress and, being tied up and stuff like that. That was common in those early Wonder Woman things. That was all a reflection of Marston and his wife and the other woman in his relationship. It's interesting stuff to watch. Totally something you couldn't do today. Very interesting. Drop 2 says the Carol Danvers Ms. Marvel with the blue one-piece suit was drawn for Teenage Boys. All female comic superheroes, if you want them to sell. One of the more recent creations of a female comic book hero that really sold, Power Girl. What does she have? Large breasts and a big hole in her otherwise white, unitard. Big hole right there. Big hole. The original artist, Wally Wood, used to basically make her breasts larger and larger and larger just to see if the editors would stop him. Marshall says there's a lot more interesting items in her creation than just that. Oh yeah, Wonder Woman's it's really fascinating. If you really want to know some interesting stuff behind making a character, reading books about Marston and his relationship and how all that went through, because it's a lot more complex than it sounds. Yeah, Wally Wood's Power Girl, as I mentioned, yes, Marshall says, a fairly accurate recent movie that centers around Marston's creation of Wonder Woman has Marston in the title. I'll have to take a look at that. I don't know, I haven't seen it, but I'd be very interested because it's very cool. TDG says, yeah, the hole is a boob window. Yes, it's later been retconned that the reason she does it is because it attracts the attention of supervillains, and so they're looking there when she's going to come beat the snot out of them. Please. It's just so we can see her cleavage. Yes, Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman. Okay, is that the name of it? I'll have to take a look and find that. That's pretty cool. That is really fascinating the way Wonder Woman got made. Drop 2 says, Wallywood stated if he had to live his life over again, he'd cut off his hands. Really? That's because I very much like his art. I really like his Superman work in what is it? It's the same comic that Justice Society was appearing in. His Superman work in the 1970s I really like. It was the first time it was Earth 2 alternate universe where the World War II superhero versions lived and worked. And Superman was older by then, All-Star Comics. And Superman was older by then, so he had gray temples, kind of like mine are naturally doing. And it's the first time he had that. Anytime we've seen Superman older since then, he has those gray temples. But he also was drawn a bit more like he was in the Golden Age. Because the artwork that Siegel and Schuster did for Superman was not the greatest artwork in the world. There were much better artists to come after them. But Superman was kind of this squinty-eyed guy. He could only leap 1/8 of a mile in an Earth 2 for the longest time. That's what he could do. And his work on Superman, I thought, made Superman look a lot more like the Golden Age Superman. The difference being Wallywood was, frankly, a better artist. But I love his work on that, so I know he's got an interesting story behind him, too. Drop 2 says, Wallywood did some fantastic work with EC Comics and later Warren Publishing. Yeah, EC before they got shut down by the Comics Code Authority. Yeah, I know he did some work there. He's a good artist. I like him very much. And I thought he did a really good Justice Society when he was on that run in All-Star Comics when they revived the Justice Society after many, many, many years, decades. Anyway, female superheroes have always been sexualized. Deal with it, Scarlet, who has been trafficking on her own beauty for at least 20 years. Pot calling the kettle black is the only thing that comes to mind. You have a portfolio by Wallywood? Drop 2 says, oh, cool. I like Wallywood very much. I think if you asked me who are my, favorite artists, it probably goes Alex Ross way up at the top. Wallywood is somewhere in there close by. But probably above Wallywood is the team of Kurt Swan and Murphy Anderson, or Swanderson, as they were called, because they did Superman for decades, and I think they did really good work. So the three of them, pretty close to the top. So, let me see. I already talked about my new channel, Tales from SYL Ranch Darkroom. A link to the first video on it. Take a look over there. Like, sub, hit the notification bell, and share it on social media. John Bushima, Alex Toth, Frank Frazetta. Oh, God, yeah. Well, Frank Frazetta, another one who I think is great. All of those guys are great. I simply spent so much time reading Superman and Action Comics. The team of Swanderson, I thought, were really good. There's a whole bunch of them that I think were really good. Today, I think a lot of them are good. It's just that they tend to do more caricatures than realistic human beings. Sometimes that works. You can do Batman a little weirder and more dramatic, because he's a creature of the night. But Superman requires a certain level of, accuracy, humanoid accuracy, and sometimes they don't do it. So, anyhow, I guess it is about 11:30. My back is starting to hurt. And I've pretty much talked about everything I was going to talk about. Talk about comics pretty much indefinitely. Just mostly pod calling the kettle black, Scarlet. Go back and look at shots of you on the red carpet for the last 10 to 15 years. And tell me who is being sexualized and who's doing the sexualization. Nobody forced you into those dresses where your boobs are pushed way up and you have giant cleavage about at your neck. Nobody forced you, You were taking advantage of something there, weren't you? Have I read Ross's Marvel 6-parter? Yeah, absolutely. Where Nightmare Conquers the Marvel Universe. Anything that's got his art in it primarily, other than just covers, because I think he's so expensive. About the only thing he can do is pay for Alex Ross covers. But just about anything that he's got that has characters in it throughout, they're his pages. I've read, because the guy's a genius. He does the best, most realistic, photorealistic comic art that you've ever seen. He's awesome. Alex Ross. He's freaking amazing. I'm subbed to him on YouTube. He has a channel here on YouTube. Check it out, because he'll, show you how he goes about doing some of his work. Very, very cool. So I think I'm going to let it go about 11:30 here. Alex Ross's JSA versus JLA was spectacular. Yeah, anything with his art in it's going to be pretty cool. You want a kind of cool one? There was one that was one of the Elseworlds graphic novels that was Batmite versus Mr. Mxyzptlk. Batmite, if you don't know, is an unused and now off in the corner, nobody talks about him, character that was around in the Silver Age that kind of had his homebrew bat costume, very similar in many respects to Mr. Mxyzptlk, except that Batmite wanted to help Batman and Robin, except he would always screw up. Whereas Mr. Mxyzptlk was always trying to get Superman's goat. Well, this one graphic novel, the name of which escapes me, it may have just been Batmite versus Mxyzptlk, starts out with the Silver Age, Superman and Batman, and Robin having just nabbed the Luthor and sorry, I'm thinking about this as I'm going. It's Luthor and Joker, and then Mxyzptlk and Batmite show up, and they spend the entire rest of this thing fighting each other and destroying whole universes in the process. They destroy the Silver Age universe and all of the superheroes that go along with it. Wonder Woman's last words are, "Oh, and I've never known the touch of a man." And they destroy whole universes. They destroy Earth 1 from the Silver Age, Earth 2. They destroy everything, and they get up to the big battle in Kingdom Come. And Alex Ross draws these pages. And his take on Batmite and Mxyzptlk is funny as hell. It's like they're photorealistic, but twisted, I mean, it's Mxyzptlk and Batmite done photorealistically. Mxyzptlk is done as he was in the Golden Age. Big head, a skinny body, and purple suit, and that bowler hat. And Batmite's done the same way with his goofy costume and his skinny arms and big head. But it's all like photorealistic, and it's so goofy. And that's the last part of that graphic novel. Definitely catch that. And again, it's all different artists did different pieces of work throughout the entire graphic, different pages. But they finally get Alex Ross at the very end. It's hysterical. You should watch it. Drop2 said, Comics Explained on YouTube has some good videos on this battle. Yeah, the big battle at the end of Kingdom Come is very cool. And because it's so photorealistic and so many superheroes in it. Anyhow, like I say, I think I'm going to take off for the night. So that is about all I've got to say about that. I would love to keep this conversation going, so please do leave any comments, questions, or nasty remarks. I'll do my best to respond to you. So, thank you for watching. Do like, sub, hit the notification bell, share me on social media because that's the only way I can grow. And go over and take a look at my new channel, my second channel, Tales from SYL Ranch, Darkroom, and there is a link to the first video that's uploaded, the first Superman Fleischer cartoon that has been upscaled to 4K and 48 frames per second, and it's a really beautiful print. So, thanks very much, and watch again. That's all the time that I have, so thank you from Tales from SYL Ranch. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.